So our first speaker is Mark Fair from Collins Aerospace. The title of his talk is Redefine Air Travel. Mark, is all yours.
Good morning, everyone. Good day. It's a pleasure to be here. And if I find my right share button, we'll get my presentation up. Very well, I think that'll work. So first, a little bit about who I am. I work at Collins Aerospace, which is now part of the Raytheon Technologies Corporation. I've worked for 34 years in the aviation industry.
Excuse me. Can you use your slide presentation show, because I mean, we're showing just, it's not in the presentation mode. On the screen, sorry.
Well, as far as I can tell,
that one, that should work. Yeah. Yeah, that works. So, sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, no problem. Most of the time has been in Heritage Rockwell and aviation, avionics equipment. And I've worked everything from autopilots to flight recorders. In the new company, I'm now in the enterprise engineering in an advanced architectures role. And one of the activities I've been in is our internal task force looking into this. How does COVID and air travel interact? And so the name of our task force is Redefining Air Travel. And we've been looking at ways we can constructively help the aviation industry and reduce the risk of COVID throughout the journey. Of course, it's always reduce the risk. You can't guarantee anything or ensure everything goes to zero as much as we would like that. But we're making sure that when we lean into something, we create a positive result. So I'll share some of our thoughts with you today. So first, is this video strip on the side blocking the slides, or do you guys not see that?
No, we don't see it.
Okay.
Don't see it.
So first, who are we? The task force is led by our executive leadership, Colin, Leanne, and Jayana. And we're out trying to regain public confidence in flying in airplanes due to the COVID-19 environment. And of course, we want to focus on things that are ready or near ready and help as much as we can, as soon as we can. Another thank you to my colleagues. The technical team is shown there, and as well as the customer team. So we are both trying to engineer solutions and stay coordinated with our airplane builders, our airlines, our airports, and making sure that, as always, it's a solution that fits into their expectations and where they want to go. Okay, so first, the journey. Collins is thinking about it from the entire journey. As soon as you arrive at the airport to departing at the airport, and broke it down into phases in between for how we affect various things we touch, where we need spacing, and how we can get back to making it through that trip. The organizations in our company that are involved in that are primarily airports, interiors, and power and controls. We have many other business units, but information management systems, we have several of the things we see at the airport from involved in the journey, and trying to think of ways we can improve on those for COVID characteristics or mitigating COVID. Interiors, so of course, we've all seen the various parts inside of the airplane when we used to travel. And how can we make that whole in the airplane experience lower risk? And then the part on the right here is we also have air management systems. And so the airplane, the way it recycles the air in the airplane and filtering and how all that works, are there any further steps that would benefit there? Okay. Oops. So now I'll go into things we're doing at the airport a bit more. So in the airport, one of our big themes or initiatives is actually enabling a contactless airport. And this has benefits that will protect not only the passengers, but also the staff and everyone else associated with air travel throughout your journey. The first thing that probably comes to mind with contactless is it'll help in that you're not touching things. And one of the ways COVID is transferred is through touch, but also through the droplets or air. A contactless journey helps that also, in that if you expedite transactions that still need to occur, but you do it in a contactless way and they happen quicker, you can maintain flow, which allows you to not have as many lines and allows you to have social distancing more naturally without having to try to deal with the logistics of a queue for how to sustain that. And we probably all would enjoy the less lines and better flow anyway. So on the airport side of things, Collins provides kiosks for check-in. So there's one point in a journey where the passenger interacts. We have to think about when they drop their bag off, what happens? When they go through security, or even a check before they go through security, as you're boarding the airplane, and then as you're traveling internationally through immigration, records, visas, passports, how would you manage all those items and have to pass them around less? So with those, as I mentioned, the contactless journey will enable in several points along that, but there's also then biometrics. So biometrics, instead of handing your personal ID or your passport, if there's ways you can register or a camera can match your image to your passport, that allows it to go through and complete that transaction without you actually having to hand your passport to various people on the journey. And for that one, some of you may have actually noticed at certain airports before, we have some of those systems in place already. Queue monitoring. So we may also need to help monitor the queue, manage the queue. And since you're trying to do social distancing, anywhere you can use technology or automation for that and not bring more people to the queue to manage that would be a benefit. Another is looking into what parts of the transactions could be done somewhere else. So if we were all located somewhere for this conference at a hotel, and when the conference was over and we decided to leave, what if you could check in for the airport and drop your bag off at the hotel and have it in a, of course, a safe and secure fashion transferred to the airport and to your flight home? It would reduce your queuing and your ability to distance would be improved at the airport. And then, of course, gate management. We've all seen the crowds around a gate and just how eager various passengers get, and they they try to come right up to the gate all at the same time, will of course be a challenge for the gate agents and everyone to manage how to do that and keep that spacing. And so we're trying to envision new systems to work with airlines and airports for how would you schedule it, or maybe batch it, or do other techniques so that you wouldn't have that current behavior culture of everyone descending on the door as soon as they open it. The other part that goes with it, though, is we also need to remember we need to be pragmatic about the impact the airport and the airline processes and applications. We have a lot invested already, and we can't be cavalier with that. So we're also trying to identify which things actually work and which things can we actually deploy in a practical way, ideally as quick as possible, to affect the outcome. Okay. So the benefits of that are to both the passengers, airports, and airlines. The airport environment is safer if the COVID risk is minimized through dealing with that journey through the airport. If you reduce contact with others, you're supporting social distancing. If you manage those queues, that crowd spacing is more effective in the first place. If you do screening, I didn't mention that on the one graphic. Temp screening, we hear a lot about that, and it'll come up again later. But if you do temp screening, you can then actually find people who are risk candidates and maybe go to further screening or further testing to cross-check how is that actually going to affect that person's trip and how it's going to affect everyone else's trip. But then also on the airport and airline side, it actually doesn't require a lot of regulation to deploy the airport and airline things. You can actually get things out there quicker since they don't go beyond the perimeter of the actual airport infrastructure. All right. So then I'll switch to interiors. So for interiors, here's a bunch of the pieces of the puzzle where we're working on the interior of the airplane now. So a contactless experience. So some of these will be modified, new, or deployed in ways beyond those we had in mind already. So some of these were in work for other reasons. Some of them exist in other places we've seen, and we're just bringing them to the airplane. So of course, motion sensors. Just like in the airport lavatory, if you have a motion sensor on the faucet there, could you have one of those in the lavatory on the airplane? Of course, our smartphone world that we live in, there's an app for everything. And how many steps along the way could you actually use your personal device so that you could actually transact along the way using it instead of some public device, either in the airport or on the airplane. The other advantage that we can't lose sight of is we would still have to provide personal data security of those transactions. Just like we do today, this would just be an extension of where those transactions originate from and how they are conducted. But if it's on your own device, there's a different approach of how you think about should you store the data, not store the data? How do you not only help in the COVID health arena to minimize the risk, while also maintaining the integrity of their personal data so that they understand it's under their control and not only meets their personal criteria for how they do that, but throughout the globe, all the other agency criteria of how personal data is managed. Surfaces and handling. So food carts, and how do you actually transact with the people during the journey of a beverage. And of course, long and short journeys, we already have times where they get handled differently and they come and go. But COVID presents some new challenges there for packaging, disposal, retrieval. So we also try to factor into our considerations there, not only how do you minimize the risk of touching for contact, transfer of the item, but also for the flight attendant who's walking down the aisle past everybody and interacting with everybody. And then lastly, to not make our green carbon footprint, waste, recycle, reuse, get any worse. If anything, we'd like to do it and also have it get better. The seat and the seat belt there, we also get into several materials. So as you could imagine now, there's the aesthetic attribute, there's the continued safe flight attribute of that seat belt's got to work and be of high quality. And then there's the reliability, the material and comfort of that seat needs to be maintained. Well, now we want to look into, are there more coatings or different materials we can use to build any of those so that it would actually be antimicrobial materials used in those products that are built and installed on airplanes. So down here in the left, we have our distancing and separation. If you follow the news, there's lots of energy on this subject about if you use the middle seat or not, and if you have a divider or a separation. So we, of course, work with our airline partners in the industry and basically trying to provide solutions if that airline wants to go that way, ways that that can be done that is safe, certifiable, reliable. But if they don't want to go that way, that's okay too. It's really just how do we enable their approach for looking into that. And then in the cabin environment, a couple of them are, of course, the sanitizer. Where all could you have sanitizer stations, or when and where could you want to, as a passenger, feel like I need or want to clean my hands? But then also lighting. There's some various lighting techniques that are showing effectiveness in antiviral suppression or actually breaking the structure and killing the virus. So we're looking into all of these. I'll go a little bit deeper on a couple of these, but keep it moving along here. So first, hand sanitizing stations. So probably a couple of phases. First, similar to a hand sanitizer you've seen out and about in public of push the lever and there you go, you get some hand sanitizer. Those have the benefit of could probably be deployed more quickly. Phase 2 would be a motion detecting one, and where you might actually design it into the lavatory and provide that ability of someone when they actually get out of the lavatory could wash their hands right then and there before they have to go back to their seat or they had to bring their sanitizer with them. So there's not only the technology aspect of this, but there's also trying to think through the practicality of what is the passenger doing and where is he going? How would that help so they don't have to bring their own hand sanitizer into the lavatory. So on the lighting, there's actually a couple of different ones. UV or hard UV, right now talking about in this 275 nanometer light wave, it actually is very quick. It does it by actually breaking the DNA in the virus so that it can't reproduce and live and cause the health risk. It's ideal for contained areas. So one of our foremost thoughts about where and how we could use it would be in the lavatory, of sterilizing the various surfaces or contact points in there. But you also have to think of the practicality of, is there a side effect that you have to make sure you account for? We've probably all seen the various plastic things that if you leave them sitting out in the sun, they discolor, and maybe that's just an aesthetic thing you could choose to live with or not. But also maybe things get brittle or start having a reliability concern. So you would not want that. So we're making sure that whatever solution we devise is not only effective for reducing the risk of COVID, but also that long-term it meets all the criteria we always met. Another one is near UV. And so for near UV, it actually destroys cells that are inside the pathogen and then actually mitigate the risk that way by allowing it to not live. Essentially, you kill that particular one. It's slower acting, but because it's in the visible light range, you can actually do it while humans are present. And so if you had all the various lighting in an airplane cabin, be it in the ceiling, your personal reading light, the other lighting along the sidewalls, it could be on for the entire duration of the flight. And so that could have the benefits of not only actually affecting the suppression, but also the psychology of the passengers to say, well, okay, great, the airplane had a good thorough cleaning before we left, but now I actually know, and it's still being suppressed or actively cleaned through the whole journey with all the new passengers on here. Okay, materials. I think I touched on most of this already. So maybe the one other aspect is not only coatings or materials to use in the construction of it, or a coating that you could spray on it, but also cleaners, covers, and caps. So if you had a cover on something, that could then be taken off and disposed with you. So much like a PPE device, you would actually have it and be able to take it and put a new one on. There's again trade-offs there about how effective that works, but also how comfortable the person using it is, because they understand that it's a new one and it wasn't there, and they don't have to have any uncertainty or doubt about how, when, what was the path of cleaning. They know it's been put on right then and there. Okay, so then the last category is air management systems. Oops. So here's probably an interesting topic for us to all understand, is that already the criteria for designing air circulation environmental control systems on airplanes require a high frequency of exchanging the air. So right now on airplanes today, in general, most airplanes in service anymore have an air recirculation system that actually exchanges the entire capacity of the cabin air in 2 or 3 minutes. So they're doing it, 20 times an hour. The way the system works is it actually goes ceiling to floor on the airplanes. So it's not forward to back, and it's not really stirring the air in the cabin. It's deploying it in the ceiling, pulling it out from the floor, and in general, keeping it localized that way. It then comes out and goes through a HEPA filter. And you may have heard of HEPA filters out and about today. That's essentially what hospitals use. You can get HEPA filters with 9 decimal points or, 4 nines or 5 nines, so that you can still have different levels of filtering in the HEPA filter, but they are filtered air as it comes out of the cabin. It goes back into a mixed manifold where they then also bring in outside air. And in general, it's a 50-50 split where the outside air gets mixed with half the recirculated and filtered air. The other half of the return air actually gets dumped overboard so that you're actually just bringing in the new fresh air. Okay. So in general, the return air or the environmental control system air, it is highly filtered today. So if you were thinking about it, you'd want to think about it as more comparable to a hospital than to a grocery store as far as air filtration goes. The cabin air is also controlled by the flight crew. So they can actually turn it on early before the airplane leaves, or they can actually turn it off and just be bringing in all outside air. Of course, there's trade-offs with both of those. The more you use the system, the more it wears out sooner. And if you bring in all outside air, depending if you're on a hot day in Arizona or whether you're up at altitude, that makes the job of the environmental control system different, and then would affect the crew and cabin passenger comfort during the journey. 2 other aspects is also within this system, even though it's filtered, looking into, so on the ground, instead of the cleaning crew spraying a disinfectant, or in addition to the cleaning crew spraying a disinfectant, are there ways we could integrate into this system on-ground decontamination solutions? And then just like that lighting solution we had in the cabin, are there also in-flight lighting solutions we could integrate into the environmental control system to decontaminate in there throughout the journey? Okay. So this is my last slide then, and I'd like to say thank you to the American Carbon Society for inviting me to chat about some of the things we're doing in the aviation industry to help lower the risk and increase the health confidence of our passengers, our airport staff, and everybody involved in the journey along the way. Topics that I believe I touched them all. Oh, maybe not the contact tracing. So while you're going through this journey and you're mitigating all these risks, one of the things that I think of about the whole journey is more that the aviation industry is more a mover of people, not a virus spreader. So we don't make the virus be more or don't actually carry it individually. It's the people that we're trying to mitigate the risk for, and it's the people that are moving around in this trip. So at the end of the day, since it's a minimize the risk situation. What if you do find out someone on a trip did get affected? They had it before or after they landed. Part of the task is to then do contact tracing to find out who all did they come in contact and where are they now and how might that actually be affecting things. So a lot of those biometrics, contactless, how would you maintain secure data, but also maybe improve how to have expedient contact tracing and therefore contain the risk candidates and what actions you might want to take to have that contact tracing be more effective. So I think I'm about at the end of the time that you had allocated for this subject. So I'll call it a day unless there's anything else our hosts want to do at this point.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Very good presentation. I think because of time limit, let's just have one question. The social distance required for COVID-19 is revised from 6 to 10 feet. Even with the middle seat unoccupied, providing this distance still will be challenged. How can this be addressed except for limiting the number of the passenger per flight?
So I think I followed that. So yeah, social distancing while you're on the airplane is going to be a challenge. To follow the 6 feet guideline, there's lots of places in the journey, not only when you're in the middle seat or not, but when you're boarding, when you're deplaning, when you're going to the lavatory, you're going past people throughout that journey that may be in less than 6 feet. So there's two things. One is we are trying to support the industry and the airlines for if they do want to not use that middle seat, how can you provide a separator or a barrier to avoid that? But also there's PPE and masks. So it's a risk mitigation approach. So you still want your mask to then provide that barrier in a more physical way rather than a geometry or by distance way. So we're doing everything that we can do to minimize it. And then lastly, air filtration and circulation. In general, we've heard a lot about how the risk of COVID is less when you're outside compared to when you're inside. And a lot of that has to do with the density and the ability of those droplets and particles to go from one person to another. And so the air filtration system that goes from the ceiling to the floor and then is actually filtered is also another big step. And so if we can improve the efficiency of that or the materials on the seats between you, no one of these is a guarantee of no risk. It's all of how can we deploy the things in a practical way to minimize the risk for the journey. Did I answer the question? I'm not sure I followed it quite exactly.
Okay, thank you, Mark, and appreciate. So because of time limit, we have more questions. We can move to this afternoon, the roundtable discussion. Thank you, Mark, again.
Yep.